shoot, Ryan, I had that song I wanted to play, but we don't know how to work the speaker yet. What's it called? Oh, shoot. I had it. It's like everybody's working for the weekend. It's an 80s song. The guy who sang it's probably dead. We've never, no one our age has really heard of that unless, they were forced to listen to the greatest of the 80s track with their parents in the minivan growing up. You guys don't know that song? If you know that song, somebody please comment. I think it's by Loverboy. That dude was like, I don't know, 6 feet. 90 pounds back in the 80s, and now he looks like he, lives and breathes White Castle. Anyway, I'm ranting. It is a great day to finally be here. Ryan, the producer, just came out of surgery a couple days ago, and you typically, for those of you that haven't seen him, he's a pretty fair-skinned chap, but with everything else and the loss of blood and everything else as they were fixing him up, he looks like he's actually getting some color back in his face. Ryan, you doing all right? He's doing all right. And he's here. We took Wednesday off. We thought we could come in tomorrow, but that didn't happen either. But he was a champion. He got up today, and he's doing everything from the producer's desk with one arm. I hope we had a camera because that's pretty impressive. We could put you in one of those motivational, 30-second videos where it's like, you want to quit? Look at this guy. He's doing everything with one arm. But hey, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, folks, welcome back. It's been a long week. We had Morgan Zeggers on Sunday for a special impromptu episode, and that was such a blast. And we had Todd Seavey, the author of Libertarian for Beginners, coming on. And as soon as I thought, hey, we could just discuss fun topics all the time, every time here on the live show, we had the Manchester bombing, and everyone there is in our prayers. And no, we're keeping track of things. Hopefully some of you have checked out the website. We've got some fantastic blogs going up covering current events, from the fact that Nick Elferman from Parks and Recreation, who played Ron Swanson, can't legally start a distillery. And if he did, he couldn't brew his single bottle of whiskey for 23 years, to everything else we have going on. But like I say all the time, the purpose of Remso Republic Live is a little bit different from the podcast. We want to cover things that we wouldn't typically cover on the podcast, primarily current events, but not the current events that are being force-fed to you by the mainstream media. Because if we know anything, it's that the fake news is rampant. And just because Facebook has a button that says report fake news doesn't mean anything's changing. For those of you that have tuned in the last couple of weeks, the one thing I kind of just typically bring up is the fact that I don't think we can necessarily tell the breaking news from the things that aren't really breaking news. Because if I see another breaking headline titled "Trump gets 2 scoops of ice cream, everyone gets 1," I'm probably going to take my cable box outside and shoot it. But that's what we're living with. Oh, Melania wouldn't hold his hand. Oh, they wore a veil to the Vatican. Oh, Trump, he got 2 scoops of ice cream. Trump, look at what he's doing. Our fragile democracy. Fire Comey. Oh, my God, he fired Comey. Oh my God! We can't tell the difference anymore. We can't tell the difference anymore. I will tell you one thing that's kind of bugging me these days, and it's not as much because I'm not surrounded by it constantly, but it's my home away from home. That's right. I'm talking about Lynchburg, Virginia. For those of you that remember, while producer Ryan and I and Juliana were down there, some pretty crazy stuff was going on, and now we're back in Nova. And things are a little bit quieter up here, but it just reminds me, we can't, the media is purposely going to ignore the things that actually matter to us. And while they're pounding Trump and the Republicans on everything, it's the double standard is showing itself. What we had the past 8 years was a lawless administration. They went after our police. The foreign policy agenda was, let's weaken our allies while strengthening our enemies, and let's dissolve our need for borders. And what happened? Let me rewind back 2014. El Salvador, Guatemala. You have a giant civil war going on because of the drug issue down there. They travel up through Mexico and get to the Texas border. Thousands and thousands of El Salvadorian children, child refugees, as we're painted. We see the pictures online, and they're small children. What ends up happening is, one, those aren't necessarily children. They're in their 20s. They're adult men. And then what happens? Oh, we don't send them back or anything. No. we take them in. We try and give them health care. We try and give them education. If you're in Virginia, this will probably be nothing new to you. But what happens? The Obama administration has ICE and everyone else bring them up to Virginia. They put them in these facilities where they're going to help, house them and everything else. Well, long story short, a lot of those kids who are adult men end up going throughout the Commonwealth. They end up spreading throughout the state. And what do we see arise in? We see a rise in violent crime, violent murders. We see an increase in human trafficking, which we thought in Virginia at least had gone down drastically ever since we exposed it. And then we've got the growing heroin epidemic, the drug epidemic we're seeing. We had a lawless administration trying to turn us into a lawless country, and now we're trying to fix it. But the gang issue is something that you won't see unless you're like looking at your real local news, and that's even if they want to cover it, because it doesn't necessarily bring the ratings. I want to talk about the gang issue a little bit more, but I want to bring on someone who's an expert in this. He's a candidate for Lynchburg's Commonwealth attorney out here in Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Griffin. Tim, welcome to the program, man.
Hey, thank you, Remso. Thank you for having me.
So are we in freak out mode or not in freak out mode? Because I know a lot of people who are in freak out mode and a lot of people that don't know if they should be in freak out mode. So not to cause a pandemic, but let's just rewind a second. This gang issue, it's been on the increase. You're the only person out there in Lynchburg and predominantly the state that's talking about this. Can you fill us in a little bit more?
So I'm a candidate for Commonwealth's attorney in Lynchburg, and we came out very early, the end of February. We were talking about gangs in Lynchburg and the increase in gangs in Lynchburg. And that's something that we were talking about. Some people said, and there was and I'm not saying anything that's not been reported in the news. There was an MS-13 caused homicide that started in Lynchburg and ended in Bedford, and then that's something that really got people's attention in Central Virginia about how bad the gangs like MS-13 and other gangs have really gotten here.
Yeah. So right now, what we're seeing is the Trump administration has Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He's saying, we're going to enforce our immigration laws and we're going after the drug problem. I mean, I feel that at the federal level, they're really trying to clamp down on it. What's your vibe down there? I mean, law enforcement, do you think they have a grasp on things? The Commonwealth's Attorney Office, do you think they're actually confronting this the way it needs to be? How confident do you feel that our public servants are going to be able to actually combat this threat?
Yeah, so the first thing that I noticed a couple weeks ago is President Trump made some changes over at ICE, and ICE went up and picked up, I think, close to 1,000 illegals, and many of which who were in gangs. And that was something that we should have seen a long time ago, and I think you're exactly right. When you have liberal politicians like Barack Obama, who are more concerned with getting the votes of certain people than actually enforcing the laws, what we ended up having was a lot of illegals here. And I think that we all know most hardwood people. But the fact is when you let a large number of people into our country that don't mind breaking law to even get here, that this is what you end up with. And so that's something that we've had to deal with here locally. I think that law enforcement is working very hard on it. The police department in the city where we live at in Lynchburg, Virginia, has addressed it. They have a task force that kind of looks at gangs and street crimes. But in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, that's been something that's been falling through the cracks for a long time. And that's why we've taken such a strong stand on it, because it's something that should have happened a long time ago.
Exactly. Now, when we look at MS-13 specifically, what I heard from locals when this issue was starting, when we had that murder out in Bedford several months ago, was this. One, there's not a real gang problem. There was just one murder, and they happened to be El Salvadorian. We should not worry about this. The second thing was, well, of course you're not going to hear about this. Gangs don't publicly go out and show you what they're doing, or else they'd fail to be a criminal enterprise. So you've got some people that saying that this whole thing is being exaggerated, and then you've got others that say that this thing isn't being focused on enough. And coming from, initially Fairfax, I remember when those children were brought up here. They were brought up to, I think, Ryan, what was it, Leesburg, Reston, Manassas? Yeah, around the Northern Virginia area. Where are they? A lot of them went missing, reported to have gone missing. A lot of them were released. And when we look at these adult men who were masqueraded by the Obama administration as children, they have gang tattoos. And, I'm from, cartel country, Arizona. When you look at certain tattoos, the only way you can get them is if you've actually gone through the ritual of initiation. And typically, in order to get that specific tattoo saying, and I don't have a picture of it, so I'm not going to describe it, folks. I apologize for that. When you get that specific tattoo after you've been initiated into a gang, it means that you had to kill somebody. So we're not dealing with your low-level gang members. We're not dealing with, I forgot what somebody said. We need to focus on the white gangs. Yeah, the white gangs in suburbia. Come on. I mean, we have actual killers who were brought in by the Obama administration, and they're running around. So my question is this: is it something that we should is it something that's on the increase, or is it something that we can put a cap on right now just by actually enforcing the law?
Yeah, so I think here locally, there was a news article in 2011 that said they had identified around 240 gang members in our city. And 5 years later, 6 years later, where we are now, they're now saying that there's 43 to 46 identified gangs in our city. So the problem has clearly gotten worse. We clearly have not taken a hard enough line against it. And that's something that we've set out to do. The Lynchburg Police Department here, they've identified close to 600 gang members. And I think we have to keep in mind that obviously times have changed. I'm talking to you right now. I mean, the technology is incredible. So 15 years ago, you would have had somebody posting up on a corner to sell drugs. Now you're not going to see people out as often wearing colors. What you're going to be seeing is people communicating on and through social media, on and through their phones. So the bad part of that is you're not going to see them on the street corners. And that's good that we're not seeing it, but it's still there, and it's actually increased in a lot of ways. The other thing is that on the flip side of that, law enforcement is better able to catch people on Facebook and on social media who are posting up gang signs, gang colors, basically self-identifying that they are in gangs. And I think that's one of the most effective ways to determine who is in a gang and who's.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the growing issue, because I forgot what it was, but I think it was a high school girl that was murdered a couple months ago. I remember you and I talking about this at a meeting, and I mean, she had openly said online, okay, this person is connected to a gang. This person has committed crimes, and then she ends up dead, and then we wonder why it happened. But, I brought up several things. I brought up human trafficking, which for Lynchburg, it was one of the highest places in the country. And it's the second most church city in the world. Lynchburg's a beautiful place. And it was not the place that you expect a giant human trafficking ring to be pushing people through up the coast. So you've got that on the rise. And then you have the heroin epidemic, which is pushing people up. And then you have, the immigration problem, which I'm happy that we're finally cracking down on. But what do you think is the actual source? Is it just the fact that we weren't enforcing our laws for a while, or the fact that, we didn't understand that, okay, maybe we need to take the heroin epidemic more seriously? I mean, where do you think the root of their ability to be able to spread like this and take up so much power within our communities has been?
Frankly, and I hate to say this, but a bad economy has helped create a window for young people who can't find jobs, can't find an identity because they can't find a job. It's made it more appealing to join a gang where you have a sense of belonging, where you have the ability to make money, or at least that's what's sold to you. I think that, the illegals, that's certainly one part of the gang problem. But in Lynchburg, very few of these gangs are comprised of illegals. And I think what we're really seeing is a lot of domestic gangs. And I think that you've seen, whereas a few years ago, there would have been gangs that were more likely to try to identify with either the Bloods or the Crips nationally. What you're seeing now is local homegrown gangs that identify with a certain street or a certain neighborhood. And once they get established, then maybe they'll try to fall under the umbrella of a national gang. But what you're seeing is there's so much desire for that at the local level that there's a lot of local gangs coming up. And it's not just Hispanic gangs. It's not just black gangs. We've got white motorcycle gangs in Lynchburg too. I mean, it's across the board, and all of them need to be taken seriously because, as we know, there may be a gang in Lynchburg. Well, there's a lot of gangs in Lynchburg that have never killed anyone, but they're involved with the drug trade. And so how long do we let that go on? How long do we allow them to distribute in our city without real sanctions coming against them before this turns into a real problem when we have another shooting? I mean, just a couple years ago, there was a young boy that was murdered. This year, we've had a boy that was murdered. I mean, this has to stop. And I think about, some people say, well, let's let the gangs take care of themselves, let them shoot at each other. And that's just not the way it works. And I'm reminded of a recent story out of Chicago. It was a cold case where a 4-year-old female was shot, a young girl was shot and killed, and they weren't able to identify who had shot the girl. And for years, they weren't able to bring charges, and they just enough. When they're affecting our children, they're not only taking our children on the front end to put them into gangs in the first place, but they're being murdered on the back end. It's just horrific. And I feel like it's high past time that people take a stand with this. And this is something that we need a strong conservative leader, certainly in Central Virginia, but throughout the state. We need strong conservative leaders that are going to take this seriously in a way that we haven't before.
Exactly. And, just to reiterate what you said, you're absolutely right. The political correctness, the inability to actually confront evil, and the fear of what could come, that's what's ultimately allowing the bad guys to win at this. But, let's kind of switch to campaign mode a little bit, because I'm glad we got to cover so much of the actual issue, because I'm not seeing this on, state level news or anywhere else. Obviously, MSNBC, CNN, they're not going to be able to cover this. I think you were on Fox discussing something similar recently. But to kind of switch into campaign mode, I know you, Tim, and I trust you to do the job that you're looking to do. But for those out there that are like, okay, he identifies the problem, but anyone can identify the problem. What are the actual solutions that you want to implement if you take this office? But first, you've got to take the June 13th primary.
That's right. And I appreciate those kind words. Here's how we've approached this. And I think that a lot of communities are being caught off guard, right? Because we have a city nearby named Danville. And Danville had 16 homicides last year in 2016. 16 homicides for a city who doesn't even have close to 100,000 people, doesn't even have close to 75,000 people. And so when you've got that many homicides taking place, a third to a half of those are gang related. You find a community that this has kind of crept up on them. They weren't expecting this. They said it could never happen in our community. It could never happen in the Bible Belt. And it's happening. It's not only happened, it's happening now. And so what we need is for prosecutors and law enforcement to start taking a very proactive approach. And this is something that our police department here locally has already done, but it's something that our Commonwealth Attorney's Office has failed to do. What we want is instead of most prosecutors are very reactive. What they do is they let a warrant cross their desk for drug distribution. It's already charged by a police officer, and they just take it through the system. What we need to be doing is saying, okay, when we get a warrant in that somebody yesterday, John Smith, was distributing drugs, we need to see if we can identify them as part of a criminal street gang, part of a criminal enterprise. And if we can, we need to direct indict them, and we need to come down hard on them. That's something that we haven't seen happening. There's no proactive approach. There's no gang prosecutor sitting down every single day and looking at what these guys are doing. And there's a few other things I think we should do too, but I don't know if you want to chime in at this point.
Yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I think that there's a cultural problem in our city, and I think we're seeing that in a lot of the schools. What we're seeing is that in these certain neighborhoods, kids are able to watch TV, look on their phones, and they're able to see what they could have, the cars they could have, the money they could have, and the jobs just aren't around for them to do that. And RJ, I'm sure you had a job when you were growing up. I certainly did. I was able to go right down the street and work at a fast food restaurant, and that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, to put money into my pocket. That's something that there's not opportunities downtown in a lot of cities in Virginia, and that's something that we've seen throughout the country, and that's something that's just really gotten worse under the Obama administration. And so these things have a real impact. One of the things I pledged to do is first of all, I'm not going to be one of these prosecutors that's a politician off in Richmond. I'm going to be taking care of the city here that we live in, paying attention to the problems that we have. But I also have pledged to really be in the middle schools. I'm going to be really a force for change, a force for good with these kids in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade before they're really even introduced to the idea or the opportunity to join a gang. That's something that we really need and we haven't seen before. We need a prosecutor who's able to come into schools and say, hey, here's the carrot and stick approach, and this is what we need to do about it. And that's something that it just hasn't happened as of late, and we seriously need something like that here. Frankly, what we have is organized crime in Lynchburg. We have organized crime in our city. And for too long, we've pretended like it's not organized crime. We've pretended like these are individual actors, and they are not. And so we talk about a drug epidemic, and there's a lot that we can be, and we are, and we should be doing about the addiction problem. But on the other hand, there's people making money off of this. And we know as free market capitalists, we know that if there's money to be made, they're going to continue to come here. And we need to make the pain much worse than the risk of that they have when they go out to make money. So that's something that we're going to change in Lynchburg, and that's something that I think a lot of cities are waking up to. We need an actual strategy. There's no strategy in our city, and that's what's so pathetic about what's going on. They're just very reactive, and that's going to change once we win this Republican nomination and win this race in November.
Exactly. Tim, I've got to let you go. If people want to connect with you, learn more about your campaign, about yourself and everything else, if they want to follow you on social media, how can they do so?
So we have our website at griffinforlynchburg.com, and we also put stuff up on Facebook almost daily, Tim Griffin for Lynchburg Commonwealth Attorney.
Perfect. Tim Griffin, thank you so much for coming on, man. Best of luck in your race, and be safe out there. This is not one of those topics. I mean, it's like what I said earlier. It's the fear of being confronted. It's the fear of confronting evil, and then there's the fear of actually dealing with it that's crippling our country. And it's obviously hurting our community. So definitely thank you for what you're doing, and best of luck in your race, sir.
Remso, thank you so much for having me on. I'm a big fan of the show.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Folks, it's like what we discussed on – when was the last episode, Ryan? Tuesday of the live show? It was Tuesday. It was the day after the Manchester bombings. But it's this failure to actually confront evil and actually call it what it is. It's a failure to actually say this is wrong, this is right, this is what you have to do when someone is not just breaking the law, but they're doing something which is a crime against humanity. What madness is this? 8 years, when you look at the grand scheme of things, 8 years is not really a long time. But it was a long road coming to where we are now. And no, I'm not going to be one of those people that just blames everything back on Obama. We could take the issues back to where they need to go because that's where they need to go. But we're still recovering from a lawless administration. And until we actually confront the problems that we're facing as a country, as a culture, as a society, nothing's going to happen. I mean, it's very easy just to say the things that are easy to say because they come with no risk. But it's the things that come with a risk that actually require you to take up the righteous cause and actually go out and deal with it. Well, folks, I'm going to let you go. Tune in Monday. Right, we're coming back Monday. I keep forgetting it's Friday. Oh, yeah, we had the song, Everybody's Working For. I'm not going to murder you with my singing voice. I'll try and get a stereo working there. We'll try and connect some music so it's not just me singing, looking stupid. But anyway, folks, tune in Monday. We've got more coming your way. And as always, tune in next time, America. I'm Remso W. Martinez with Remso Republic Live. Big shout out to the Self-Defense Radio Network, Player FM, and Auto Radio. Follow me on Twitter at Remso1, and I'll see you next time, folks. See ya.